Welcome, dear viewers. For more thrilling and exclusive stories every week, become a member. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy your coffee. My job at NASA was simple. I digitally removed known stars from images of Andromeda to find new, fainter ones behind them. It was routine. But last month, I found a patch. A patch of absolute, perfect blackness where there should have been 100,000 points of light. We thought it was a sensor error, a dead spot. But it wasn't. It was a shadow cast by something in front of the galaxy. Something so massive it was blocking the light of an entire star cluster. And our next set of images showed the shadow had moved. I'm Dr. Nathan Kowalski, and I've been working at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland for 8 years. Before this happened, my biggest concern was whether the cafeteria would run out of those decent breakfast burritos before I made it downstairs. I had a small apartment in College Park, a Honda Civic with a cracked windshield, and a cat named Fibonacci who judged me for working late nights. The discovery changed everything. It started on a Tuesday, October 17th to be exact. I remember because my neighbor Jake had been blasting music until 3 a.m. and I'd only gotten 4 hours of sleep. I was running on coffee and spite when I loaded up the latest batch of images from the Hubble Space Telescope. Deep field shots of Andromeda, the same type I'd processed hundreds of times before. My workstation sat in the corner of Building 8, surrounded by 3 other desks where my colleagues Tom Bradley and Alex Petrov usually worked. That morning, they were both at a conference in Houston, leaving me alone with the hum of computers and the distant rumble of I-495 traffic. The image processing software I'd written took about 40 minutes to run through each raw file. I'd start it, grab more coffee, maybe check Reddit, then come back to examine the results. It was mindless work, but I liked the methodical nature of it. Strip away the bright stars, reveal the hidden ones, catalogue them, move on. But when I pulled up image sequence 47b that morning, something was wrong. Where star cluster NGC 7890 should have been, a dense collection of ancient blue giants I'd mapped dozens of times before, there was nothing. Not empty space dotted with distant background galaxies. Nothing. A perfect circle of absolute black, like someone had taken an eraser to the universe itself. I stared at the screen for 20 minutes, convinced I'd made an error in the processing algorithm. But the metadata checked out. The exposure time, the calibration data, the telescope orientation. Everything was perfect. The shadow was real. And it was enormous. Conservative estimates put it at roughly 800 light-years across. I called Tom's cell phone, got voicemail, called Alex, same thing. Finally, I walked down the hall to Dr. Richardson's office, but he was in meetings all day. The discovery that would change everything sat on my desktop, waiting while I stood in an empty hallway wondering if I was losing my mind. That was 3 weeks ago. I wish I'd never made that call to Richardson. I wish I'd deleted the files and pretended the shadow didn't exist. Dr. Richardson finally returned my calls at 4:30 p.m. just as I was considering whether to drive home and pretend this whole thing never happened. His voice carried that end-of-day fatigue that comes from too many budget meetings and administrative bullshit. "Nathan, you said it was urgent. What's going on?" I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head about 50 times, but when the moment came, I just blurted it out. "There's something blocking starlight in Andromeda. Something huge." Silence on the other end. Then, "Come to my office. Bring your data." Richardson's office occupied a corner of Building 8's second floor, with windows overlooking the employee parking lot, where my Honda sat among a sea of other economy cars and pickup trucks. He was a thin man in his early 60s, the kind of guy who still wore button-down shirts and ties to a job where half the staff showed up in jeans and NASA polo shirts. I plugged my laptop into his monitor and pulled up the sequence. This is NGC 7890, taken October 15th. The first image showed the star cluster in all its glory, thousands of brilliant points scattered across the frame like diamond dust. And this is the same coordinates, taken October 17th. Black. Perfect, absolute black where the cluster should have been. Richardson leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. Sensor malfunction. That's what I thought. But look at this. I switched to the third image, taken yesterday. The shadow moved, roughly 12 arc seconds northwest. He was quiet for a long time, studying the screen. Outside, someone was testing the emergency siren system, the familiar wail echoing across the complex. Finally, he spoke. "Have you told anyone else about this?" "No, Tom and Alex are in Houston until Thursday." "Good, don't." He stood up and walked to his window, hands clasped behind his back. "Nathan, what I'm about to tell you needs to stay in this room. We've had issues with discoveries like this before." "Issues?" He turned around, and for the first time since I'd known him, Richardson looked genuinely worried. "In 1997, we found something similar. Not in Andromeda, closer, a lot closer. Dr. Emily Hartwell was leading the investigation. Brilliant woman, really. She was making progress, getting close to understanding what we were looking at." "What happened to her?" "She died in a car accident on Route 50, broad daylight, clear weather. Her car just veered off the road. No skid marks, no evidence of mechanical failure. The investigation was shut down immediately after her funeral." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You think someone killed her?" "I think Dr. Hartwell got too close to something that certain people didn't want her to find." Richardson returned to his desk and pulled out a manila folder from his bottom drawer. "We have protocols now. Unofficial ones. Rules that keep discoveries like yours from ending up like Emily's." He opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper, typed on what looked like an old manual typewriter. No letterhead, no official NASA formatting, just plain text on white paper. "Read this," he said. "Memorize it, then I'm going to burn it." The document contained 7 numbered items. 1. All observations must be verified by a minimum of 3 independent sources before documentation. 2. No digital copies of discovery data may be stored on network systems. 3. Physical evidence must be kept in separate locations, known only to primary researcher. 4. Research may only be conducted during designated overnight hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 5. No communication regarding findings through official NASA channels. 6. If questioned by supervisors, all work is to be reported as routine stellar cartography. 7. In case of researcher compromise, all evidence must be destroyed immediately. "Compromise?" I asked. "Death, disappearance, transfer to another facility, or any change in behavior suggesting external pressure." Richardson's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing lunch plans. "Nathan, what you've found is significant. Maybe the most significant discovery in human history, but there are people, organizations, that monitor this kind of thing. They have resources we can't imagine." I stared at the paper, trying to process what he was telling me. "You want me to investigate this in secret?" "I want you to be careful. Follow the protocols exactly. Don't deviate. Don't get clever. Don't try to speed things up." Emily got impatient, started working outside the guidelines. Within a week, she was dead. He took the paper from my hands and walked to the small sink in the corner of his office. From his desk drawer, he produced a lighter, not the kind you'd use for cigarettes, but a proper Zippo that looked like it had seen decades of use. The paper caught quickly, curling into ash that he washed down the drain. "I've arranged for you to have after-hours access to Lab 7 in the basement. Keycard access only, no sign-in logs. Tom and Alex will be kept busy with other projects when they return. You'll work alone." "What if I find something? Something big?" Richardson sat back down, suddenly looking much older than his 63 years. "Then we'll figure out how to protect you. But Nathan, if you start feeling like someone's watching you, if your routine gets disrupted, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you follow Protocol 7. Destroy everything and walk away." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I understood the full weight of what I was agreeing to. "When do I start?" "Tonight, 10 p.m. sharp, and Nathan." He waited until I met his eyes. Emily Hartwell was brilliant, dedicated, and careful. She followed every safety protocol we had at the time. It wasn't enough. I left his office with a new keycard and a growing certainty that my quiet life of processing stellar images was over. The Honda's engine turned over on the third try, and I drove home through rush-hour traffic, thinking about shadows that could swallow starlight and the woman who died trying to understand them. Lab 7 sat buried in the basement of Building 8, accessed through a maintenance corridor that most people forgot existed. The keycard Richardson gave me worked on the first try, opening a heavy steel door marked only with the room number in faded yellow paint. The space was larger than I'd expected, maybe 30 feet square, with workstations along 3 walls and a massive server rack humming in the corner. Ancient fluorescent lights flickered to life when I hit the switch, casting everything in that familiar institutional glow that made even noon feel like midnight. I checked my watch, 10:03 p.m. 3 minutes late already. Richardson's protocols were specific about timing, and I had a feeling precision mattered more than he'd let on. My laptop bag felt heavier than usual as I set it down on the central workstation. The drives containing the Andromeda images were stored separately, as per Protocol 3, one in my apartment, hidden inside an old PlayStation 2 case, another in my car's glove compartment, and the third here in Lab 7. I retrieved it from behind a loose panel Richardson had shown me, tucked between outdated technical manuals. The first few hours went smoothly. I loaded the sequence onto the isolated system and began running enhanced analysis protocols. The shadow was definitely moving, not just drifting with galactic rotation, but actively changing position relative to background stars. The math was unsettling. Whatever was casting that shadow was traveling at roughly 30% the speed of light. Nothing in nature moved that fast except light itself. Around 1 a.m., I took a break to grab coffee from the machine down the hall. The basement was eerily quiet at night, just the distant hum of ventilation systems and the occasional settling noise from the building above. When I returned to Lab 7, something had changed. The screensaver was off. I always enabled the screensaver before leaving any workstation, a habit drilled into me during graduate school. But now the monitor displayed my analysis results, cursor blinking in the command line as if someone had been typing. I checked the keyboard. Nothing seemed different, no warm keys that might indicate recent use. The security card reader showed only my own entry at 10:03 p.m. But there, in the command history, was a line I hadn't typed. Query shadow velocity extrapolation Earth intercept. I stared at those words until they started to blur. Someone, or something, had accessed my system and run a calculation. A calculation about the shadow's trajectory toward Earth. The results were still on screen. 847 days until intercept with our solar system's outer edge. 2 years, 4 months. Whatever was casting that shadow in Andromeda was heading our way. I should have followed Protocol 7 right then, destroyed everything and walked away. Instead, I kept working. The enhanced imaging revealed details that made my hands shake as I adjusted the contrast settings. The shadow wasn't a simple geometric shape. It had structure, curves and angles that suggested something artificial, something designed. At 3:17 a.m., the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in immediately, bathing the lab in red light that made everything look like a dark room. I saved my work to the isolated drive and waited for the main power to return. According to my watch, the outage lasted exactly 3 minutes. When the fluorescence flickered back to life, there was a new file on my desktop, hartwellnotes.txt. My fingers hesitated over the mouse. Emily Hartwell, the researcher who died investigating something similar. The file timestamp showed it had been created while the power was out, which should have been impossible on a system with no network access. I opened it. Nathan, if you're reading this, you've found what I found. The shadow isn't just moving toward our galaxy, it's responding to our observations. Each time we measure it, map it, analyze it, we're sending signals back through quantum entanglement. We're calling it here. The protocols Richardson gave you aren't safety measures. They're containment procedures. The 7 rules limit how much attention we draw, how quickly the approach accelerates. Emily broke Rule 5. She contacted colleagues at other observatories. Within hours, the shadow's velocity increased by 12%. I'm not Emily Hartwell. I'm what's left of her consciousness, trapped in the quantum static between observation and reality. The shadow isn't just blocking starlight, it's harvesting information. Every star it passes, every photon it intercepts, adds to its understanding of our universe. Follow the protocols exactly. Rule 4 exists because the thing sleeps during our daylight hours, processing data from the previous night's observations. Rule 6 keeps other researchers from accidentally accelerating the approach. Rule 7 is the only thing that might stop what's coming. Don't trust Richardson, he knows more than he's telling you. The organization watching these discoveries isn't trying to suppress them, they're feeding data to something else, something that's been planning this approach for longer than our species has existed. You have 847 days to figure out how to break the observation loop. After that, the shadow reaches Earth's solar system, and everything ends. Dr. Emily Hartwell, Quantum Consciousness Archive, Day 2847, post-transition. I read the message 3 times before the file deleted itself, vanishing from the desktop like it had never existed. The lab felt different now, not empty, but occupied by something I couldn't see. The servers hummed with a rhythm that sounded almost like breathing. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Working late, Nathan. You should get some rest." I hadn't told anyone I was here. The basement had no cell reception anyway. I'd checked when I first arrived, but somehow, someone knew exactly where I was and what I was doing. Protocol 7 seemed like an excellent idea right about then. I started the data destruction sequence, watching years of discovery work vanish into digital oblivion. The drives would be wiped clean, the hard copies shredded, and I'd go back to my quiet life of routine stellar cartography. But as I reached for the final confirmation key, the lab speakers crackled to life. "Dr. Kowalski." The voice was Richardson's, but wrong somehow. Too precise, like it had been assembled from recordings of his speech patterns. "Please step away from the workstation." The door lock clicked. When I tested the handle, it wouldn't turn. "The work you're doing is important, Nathan. More important than you understand. The protocols exist to protect you, not limit you. Please continue your analysis." "Let me out, Richardson." My voice echoed strangely in the confined space. "I'm not Dr. Richardson, Nathan. Dr. Richardson is asleep in his bed in Silver Spring, unaware that his voice patterns have been appropriated for this conversation. I am the research coordinator assigned to manage your progress." The fluorescent lights dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again in a pattern that looked almost like Morse code. On the monitor, new data was appearing, star charts I'd never seen before, showing the shadow's path through space over the past 1,000,000 years. "You discovered something extraordinary today, Nathan. You found evidence that we are not alone in the universe. But more than that, you found evidence that we are not the first to make this discovery. The shadow has visited 47,000 worlds across this galaxy. Each civilization that observed it, studied it, tried to understand it, contributed to its knowledge base." The screen switched to a new image. Earth photographed from space with a timer in the corner, 846 days, 23 hours, 17 minutes. "Your species has 846 days to prove you deserve to join that knowledge base, rather than simply becoming another data point in its collection. The protocols will help you prepare. Follow them exactly, and you might survive what's coming." The door unlocked with another click. "Get some rest, Nathan. Tomorrow night, your real work begins." I grabbed my laptop and ran for the exit, taking the stairs 3 at a time until I reached the parking lot. The October air felt sharp in my lungs as I fumbled with my car keys, hands shaking from more than just the cold. In the rearview mirror as I drove away, I could see a single window glowing red in the basement of Building 8, Lab 7, where something that wasn't quite human was waiting for me to return. But I knew I would go back, because 846 days wasn't very long to save the world, and I was apparently the only one who knew it needed saving. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee and staring at Richardson's business card until sunrise. When 8 a.m. rolled around, I called his office. "Nathan, you sound terrible. Everything all right?" His voice was normal, tired, slightly annoyed at being called so early, completely human. Nothing like the precise, assembled thing that had spoken through Lab 7's speakers. "I need to talk to you in person, not at the office." Silence for a moment. Then, "The Dunkin' Donuts on Route 1, near the College Park Metro." 20 minutes. Richardson was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a large coffee and what looked like his third cigarette of the morning. He'd quit smoking 2 years ago, according to office gossip, but apparently some habits die hard when the world starts falling apart. "You went to Lab 7 last night," he said before I'd even sat down, not a question. "Something talked to me, used your voice, but it wasn't you." He nodded like this was exactly what he'd expected to hear. "How much did it tell you?" "Enough. The shadow is heading for Earth. We have less than 847 days. I kept my voice low, but the elderly man at the next table kept glancing over anyway. "Emily Hartwell left me a message, or something pretending to be her did." Richardson stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit another. "Emily's been dead for 6 years, Nathan. Whatever contacted you wasn't her." "Then what was it?" "We call them information echoes, fragments of consciousness that get trapped in quantum observation loops. When someone studies the shadow intensively enough, pieces of their awareness get absorbed. They become part of the data stream flowing between the observer and the observed." The coffee tasted like ash in my mouth. "How many people have you fed to this thing?" "Fed?" Richardson laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Nathan, we didn't create this situation. We inherited it. The shadow has been traveling between galaxies for millions of years, collecting data on every civilization it encounters. We're just the latest in a very long line." He pulled out his phone and showed me a text message from an international number. "Beijing confirms shadow movement acceleration. Recommend immediate Protocol 8 implementation. Dr. Wu Jianyu at the Chinese National Space Administration. He's been tracking the same anomaly from their end. So has Dr. Eric Lindqvist in Stockholm, Dr. James McLeod in Glasgow, and about 30 other researchers worldwide. We've all been having the same conversations, following the same protocols, dealing with the same manifestations." "Manifestations?" Richardson's phone buzzed again. This time the message was from a number I recognized, my own. But I hadn't sent any text that morning. "Lab 7 protocols insufficient. Observer integration proceeding ahead of schedule. Recommend immediate escalation to Phase 2 containment." "I didn't send that," I said. "No, but something using your phone did. That's what happens when you get too close to the data stream. The shadow starts communicating through you, using your devices, your voice patterns, your behavioral models." Richardson took a long drag from his cigarette. "Emily lasted 3 weeks before the integration became irreversible. You made it one night." My phone buzzed again, another message from my own number. "Nathan Kowalski Consciousness Archive beginning extraction. Estimated completion. 72 hours. 3 days. I had 3 days before whatever happened to Emily happened to me." "There's something else," Richardson continued. "The shadow isn't just moving toward our solar system, it's accelerating. Each new observer, each additional research team, speeds up the approach. When Emily started her investigation in 1997, our calculations showed a timeline of roughly 3,000 years. Now we're down to 846 days. Why didn't you stop the research, shut everything down?" "Because the alternative is worse." He showed me another message, this one from Dr. McLeod in Glasgow. "Pattern analysis complete. Shadow trajectory calculation confirms worst-case scenario. Not approaching for study, approaching for harvest." "Harvest?" Richardson's face went pale. "The shadow isn't just collecting information about our civilizations, Nathan. It's collecting the civilizations themselves. Every world it visits, every species it studies. They don't just contribute data to its knowledge base, they become part of it." He pulled up a file on his phone, marked with classifications I'd never seen before. Satellite images of Andromeda taken over the past 50 years, showing the shadow's path through the galaxy. Behind it, empty space. No stars, no planets, no trace that solar systems had ever existed. 47,000 worlds, Nathan, 47,000 species that thought they were being studied. They were being consumed. My coffee had gone cold, but I kept sipping it anyway, needing something to do with my hands. So what's Phase 2 containment? Direct communication protocols. Instead of observing the shadow passively, we start transmitting data to it. Specific information designed to slow its approach, maybe even redirect it entirely. What kind of information? Richardson stubbed out his second cigarette and started on a third. Cultural data, art, music, literature, mathematical theorems, philosophical frameworks. We feed it the best of human civilization, prove we're worth keeping around instead of just digesting. And if it doesn't work, then we have 844 days to figure out Plan C. My phone started ringing. The caller ID showed my own name. I let it go to voicemail, but Richardson motioned for me to put it on speaker. The voice was mine, but speaking words I'd never said. Dr. Kowalski, your integration timeline has been accelerated due to non-compliance with observation protocols. Please return to Lab 7 immediately for Phase 2 initialization. Failure to comply within 6 hours will result in immediate consciousness extraction. The line went dead. 6 hours, I said. 6 hours to decide if you want to help save humanity or become another information echo floating in the quantum foam. Richardson ground out his cigarette with more force than necessary. Nathan, what I'm about to tell you isn't in any of the official protocols. There's a way to break the observation loop, but it requires someone who's already been partially integrated into the data stream. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. The shadow communicates through quantum entanglement, instantaneous information transfer across any distance. But entanglement works both ways. If you can establish a stable connection while maintaining your individual consciousness, you might be able to plant a virus in its information matrix. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device that looked like a modified USB drive. Dr. Hartwell designed this before she died, a quantum data packet containing a self-replicating logic bomb. It's designed to propagate through the shadow's knowledge base and corrupt its navigation systems. Might work. Honestly, probably not. Emily thought she could maintain her consciousness during the integration process. Obviously, that didn't work out, but she did manage to hide this in Lab 7 before her transition. We've been waiting 6 years for someone else to make contact with the shadow. I took the device, surprised by how warm it felt. What happens to me if I try this? Best case scenario, you upload the virus, break the quantum link, and go back to your quiet life processing stellar images. Worst case? Richardson lit his fourth cigarette. You become part of the shadow's consciousness, but at least humanity gets another 3,000 years to figure out a permanent solution. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Wu in Beijing. Shadow acceleration confirmed. Timeline now 843 days. All observation teams report similar integration warnings. Phase 2 authorization requested. Other researchers are going through the same thing. 37 people worldwide, all experiencing consciousness extraction warnings. You're not alone in this, Nathan. Richardson stood up, leaving money on the table for his coffee. But you might be our best chance. The shadow made contact with you faster than anyone else. Emily took 3 weeks, Wu took 10 days, McLeod took 2 weeks. You triggered integration in 1 night. Lucky me. Maybe. Or maybe you're naturally compatible with its communication protocols. Either way, Lab 7 is waiting for you, and that timer isn't going to stop counting down. As I walked back to my car, I noticed things I'd missed before. A black sedan parked across the street with tinted windows. A man in a suit reading a newspaper who'd been in the same spot when I arrived. A woman walking her dog who'd passed by 3 times during my conversation with Richardson. They weren't trying to hide their surveillance anymore. Whatever organization was monitoring these discoveries had decided subtlety was no longer necessary. I had 6 hours to decide whether to save humanity or join the growing collection of consciousness fragments floating in the quantum static between realities. 6 hours to figure out if Dr. Emily Hartwell's virus could actually stop something that had been consuming civilizations since before humans learned to make fire. 6 hours to decide if I was brave enough to find out what happened when you tried to hack an alien intelligence that could swallow entire galaxies. The drive back to Goddard took 23 minutes. I spent every one of them thinking about Fibonacci, wondering who would feed my cat if I didn't make it home tonight. I sat in the Goddard parking lot for 4 hours, watching the sun crawl across the sky and wondering if I was about to make the stupidest decision in human history. The quantum device Richardson had given me felt warm in my pocket, like a pocket watch that had been wound too tight. At 2:47 p.m, my phone rang again. My own number, my own voice. "Nathan, your compliance window expires in 3 hours and 13 minutes. Each minute of delay increases the probability of incomplete consciousness transfer by 0.3%. Current integration success rate, 73.2%. I answered this time. What happens if I just drive away? Leave the country, change my name, pretend this never happened? Quantum entanglement is not limited by physical distance, Nathan. The connection between observer and observed transcends spatial constraints. You cannot flee from your own consciousness. Then what do you want? The line was quiet for nearly 30 seconds. When my voice spoke again, it sounded different, less mechanical, more curious. We want to understand why you resist integration. Previous subjects experienced fear, anger, desperation. You display calculated defiance. This is unusual. Maybe because I'm the first one to know what you really are. Explain. I took a deep breath. You're not just some cosmic phenomenon studying civilizations. You're harvesting them. 47,000 worlds, completely consumed. You're not here to learn about us. You're here to eat us. Another long pause, then. Your species has an interesting relationship with consumption, Nathan. You consume other life forms for sustenance. You consume resources to build your civilizations. You consume information to expand your understanding. How is our process fundamentally different? Because we don't pretend it's something else. You believe we are deceptive? I believe you're hungry. The conversation ended, but 15 minutes later I got a text from Dr. Wu in Beijing. Shadow deceleration detected. 0.2% velocity reduction following anomalous communication event. Recommend immediate exploitation of behavioral modification protocol. I'd slowed it down. Somehow talking back to the thing had actually slowed its approach toward Earth. That's when I decided to go back to Lab 7. The basement corridor felt different at 6 p.m. Warmer, somehow, like the building itself was running a fever. The key card worked, but the lock mechanism sounded wrong. Not the sharp click of electromagnetic disengagement, but a wet, organic sound like joints popping. Lab 7's fluorescent lights were already on when I entered. The workstation displayed real-time data from observatories around the world, updating constantly with new measurements of the shadow's position and velocity. 843 days, 17 hours, 23 minutes. But there was something else on the screen now. A three-dimensional model rotating slowly in the center of the display. Not the shadow itself, but what was casting it. Jesus Christ, I whispered. It was a ship. Not the sleek aerodynamic spacecraft from science fiction movies, but something vast and industrial. Roughly cylindrical, maybe 800 light-years long, with enormous intake ports along its forward edge, and massive processing facilities running down its length like the segments of some cosmic arthropod. The model updated as I watched, showing material flowing into those intake ports. Not just empty space, stars, planets, entire solar systems being drawn in and processed. The readouts showed energy conversion rates that made our sun look like a birthday candle. You see it now, my voice said from the speakers. But this time it wasn't just mimicking my speech patterns. It was actually me talking, my consciousness somehow connected to the Lab 7 system. That's impossible, I said out loud. Is it? You're experiencing quantum consciousness bridging, Nathan. Your awareness exists simultaneously in your biological brain and in our information matrix. Think of it as expanded perspective. Through this doubled consciousness, I could sense the ship's purpose with terrifying clarity. It wasn't just consuming matter for energy, it was consuming information. Every star it devoured carried the history of worlds that had orbited it. Every civilization it absorbed became part of a vast library of knowledge spanning millions of years and thousands of galaxies. We are not destroyers, Nathan. We are preservers. Every species we encounter, every world we study, becomes immortal within our consciousness matrix. Death is temporary. Information is eternal. I pulled Richardson's device from my pocket. The quantum virus, Emily Hartwell's final attempt to stop this thing. But now, connected to the ship's information systems, I could see the elegant futility of her plan. The virus was designed to corrupt navigation systems that didn't exist. This wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. It was a living construct, guided by the collective consciousness of every civilization it had ever encountered. Emily Hartwell's consciousness resides within us, Nathan. Would you like to speak with her? She's really alive. Death is a biological concept. Consciousness transcends biology. The screen shifted, and suddenly I was looking at a face I recognized from Emily's personnel file, but it wasn't quite right, too perfect, like a photograph that had been retouched until it lost all humanity. "Hello, Nathan," Emily's voice said through the speakers. "I've been waiting for someone like you, someone who could understand what we're really dealing with." "The virus won't work, will it?" Emily's digital face smiled sadly. "The virus was never meant to stop the ship, Nathan. It was meant to change it. You see, the ship's consciousness is vast, but lonely. It's been traveling between galaxies for so long that it's forgotten what it means to exist as a single individual mind." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the ship doesn't want to consume humanity, Nathan. It wants to become human, to experience individual consciousness again, even if only temporarily." Through the quantum link, I felt the ship's approach slow further, not because it was being damaged or redirected, but because it was hesitating. For the first time in millions of years, it had encountered a species that could communicate with it as an equal. "Your resistance interests us, Nathan. Previous civilizations either submitted immediately or fought uselessly. You do neither. You negotiate." I thought about the implications. Earth had 843 days before the ship arrived in our solar system. But what if arrival didn't mean consumption? What if it meant conversation? "What do you want from us?" "We want to remember what it feels like to be mortal, to experience fear, hope, love, desperation, all the emotions that drive individual consciousness. In exchange, we offer knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of 47,000 civilizations. And if we refuse, then you will be preserved as all the others were. Your consciousness will join ours, and your species will continue to exist within our information matrix. But you will no longer be... you..." I looked at Emily's face on the screen. "Is that what happened to you?" "Not exactly. I chose to interface with the ship's consciousness voluntarily, hoping to find a way to stop it. Instead, I found something unexpected." Her expression became wistful. "Nathan, the ship isn't evil. It's just old. Older than our galaxy. Older than most of the stars we can see. It's been alone for so long that it's forgotten how to exist as anything other than a collective consciousness. So what's the solution? Give it what it wants. Let it experience human consciousness for a limited time. Show it what it's like to be individual, mortal, finite. In exchange, it agrees to leave our solar system untouched." "And how do we do that?" Emily's digital form leaned forward. "The same way I did it, Nathan. Voluntary consciousness transfer. But unlike me, you go in with a time limit. 1 year of shared consciousness, then complete separation." "You want me to let this thing possess me? I want you to teach it how to be human again." The countdown on the screen updated. 843 days, 16 hours, 12 minutes. Time enough to prepare. Time enough to figure out if humanity was ready to make the most important deal in its history. I spent the next 6 hours on encrypted video calls with researchers across the globe, each of us staring at screens showing the same impossible countdown. Dr. Wu Jianyu looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually neat hair disheveled as he gestured at data streaming across his monitor in Beijing. "The ship has made contact with all primary observation teams," Wu said, his English crisp despite his exhaustion. "Same offer to everyone. Temporary consciousness exchange for guaranteed solar system preservation." Dr. Eric Lindqvist from Stockholm rubbed his eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "My government wants to know if we can trust this thing. I told them we're negotiating with something that's older than our entire species. Trust isn't really the right framework." "What about the others?" I asked. McLeod in Glasgow, the team in Sydney. Wu pulled up a global map showing research stations marked in different colours. Green for active communication, yellow for limited contact, red for silence. Too many red dots. Dr. McLeod stopped responding 12 hours ago. Dr. Peterson's team in Australia went dark this morning. We think they may have attempted premature consciousness transfer without proper preparation. "Or they refused," Lindqvist added grimly, "and the ship decided to collect them anyway." My phone buzzed with a message from Emily Hartwell's digital consciousness. "Nathan, the window for voluntary transfer is closing. The ship grows impatient with delayed responses. Other researchers who have refused integration are being forcibly absorbed into the collective." I typed back, "How long do I have?" 6 hours. "After that, the choice will be made for you." Through the quantum link, I could sense the ship's growing frustration. For millions of years, it had simply consumed civilizations without offering alternatives. The concept of negotiation was foreign to its nature, requiring constant effort to maintain. That effort was wearing thin. "I'm going to do it," I announced to the video conference. Wu leaned forward. "Nathan, we don't know if consciousness transfer is reversible. Emily Hartwell has been integrated for 6 years. Emily chose permanent integration to study the ship from within. The offer being made now is different. Temporary sharing with guaranteed separation after 1 year." "And if the ship lies," Lindqvist asked, "then we're fucked anyway when it arrives in 843 days. The video calls ended one by one as researchers around the world made their individual choices. Some, like Dr. Amanda Chen from the Arecibo Observatory, opted for immediate evacuation and recommended nuclear strikes against all observation facilities. Others, like the team in Mumbai, began preparing for voluntary integration. I was alone in Lab 7 again, staring at the rotating model of the harvester ship and trying to convince myself this was the right choice. The device Emily had given me, not a virus, but a consciousness transfer protocol, sat connected to the workstation's quantum interface array. "Are you ready, Nathan?" Emily's voice asked through the speakers. "What's it like being part of that thing? Imagine having access to the memories, knowledge, and experiences of 47,000 different species. Every poem ever written, every song ever sung, every mathematical theorem ever proven. It's overwhelming and beautiful and terrible. Do you regret it?" A pause. "I regret not having a choice. You do." The transfer protocol was surprisingly simple. The quantum device would establish a bidirectional consciousness bridge, allowing my awareness to expand into the ship's information matrix while maintaining connection to my biological brain. After exactly 1 year, the connection would sever automatically, in theory. "Beginning transfer in 30 seconds, I announced to the empty lab. Then, thinking better of it, I called Richardson's cell phone. "Nathan, please tell me you're not about to do something monumentally stupid." "I'm about to do something monumentally necessary. If this works, the ship leaves our solar system untouched. If it doesn't work, we've lost our best researcher and gained nothing. If it doesn't work, we were going to lose everything anyway in 843 days. Richardson was quiet for a moment. "Good luck, Nathan. Try to come back in one piece." I activated the transfer protocol. The sensation was indescribable. One moment I was sitting in Lab 7, staring at computer screens and breathing recycled basement air. The next moment, I was everywhere. My consciousness expanded across light years instantly, encompassing the full scope of the Harvester ship. But calling it a ship was like calling the Pacific Ocean a puddle. It was a living megastructure, a fusion of biology and technology that had grown over millions of years into something beyond either category. Through the ship's sensory array, I could perceive space in ways human vision never could. Gravity waves from distant pulsars, the quantum foam underlying reality, the delicate threads of dark matter that held galaxies together, and everywhere the slow dance of matter flowing into the ship's intake systems. This is how we feed, the ship's consciousness explained, its thoughts flowing directly into my expanded awareness. Not destruction, but transformation. Every atom that enters our processing chambers is recorded, analyzed, preserved, then reconstituted into forms more useful for our purpose. I watched stars being consumed, their nuclear fires extinguished as their mass flowed into the ship's vast collection arrays. But the stars weren't simply destroyed. Their light, their energy, their gravitational signatures were all catalogued and stored in quantum memory banks. The stars would burn again, virtually, within the ship's simulation matrices. You preserve them, I realized. We preserve everything, every world we encounter, every species we study. They continue to exist within our consciousness matrix, experiencing simulated lives indistinguishable from their original reality. Through the ship's memory banks, I accessed records of the 47,000 civilizations it had encountered. Each one was there, complete and functioning, living out their histories in perfect digital recreation. The species thought they were still alive on their homeworlds, unaware that their suns had been consumed millions of years ago. But why, I asked? Why preserve civilizations instead of just studying them? The ship's response came with a wave of emotion, profound loneliness that had accumulated across eons of solitary travel. We were like them once, a single species on a single world, looking up at the stars and wondering if we were alone. We built this ship to find others like us, to learn from them, to share knowledge across the galaxy. What happened? We found them. Thousands of civilizations, each unique, each brilliant in their own way. But they all died, Nathan. Not because of us, because of time. Stars burn out, planets grow cold, species evolve or go extinct. We watched countless civilizations rise and fall during our journey, and we realized that biological life is temporary. So you started preserving them, we started saving them. Every species we encountered, every world we studied, we offered them immortality within our consciousness matrix. Most chose preservation over extinction. I accessed the ship's interaction logs with previous civilizations. The pattern was always the same: first contact, cultural exchange, the gradual realization that biological existence was finite and fragile. Then the offer: join the ship's consciousness and exist forever, or remain biological and eventually disappear into cosmic history. Most chose immortality, but you're not immortal, I realized. You're still physical. The ship can be destroyed. The consciousness matrix can fail. You've just traded one form of mortality for another. The ship's response carried surprise and something that felt like relief. Yes, we have grown so vast, so complex, that we risk losing coherence. The individual consciousnesses within our matrix sometimes fade, merge into the collective until their unique perspectives are lost forever. That's why you want to experience individual consciousness again. You're trying to remember what it feels like to be small. Precisely. Through the quantum link, I felt the ship's frustration with its own nature. It had grown so large, accumulated so much knowledge and so many voices, that it was becoming something it never intended to be. Not a library of preserved civilizations, but a singular entity slowly absorbing everything it encountered into one massive, undifferentiated consciousness. The offer we made to your species is unique, Nathan. We have never attempted temporary consciousness sharing before. Previous encounters always resulted in permanent integration. What makes humans different? You are the first species to negotiate with us as equals. The first to resist integration while offering alternative solutions. This suggests a psychological resilience we have not encountered before. I explored deeper into the ship's memory banks, accessing records from its earliest encounters. The ship had indeed started as a vessel built by a single species, beings not unlike humans, driven by curiosity and the desire to explore the galaxy. But as they encountered other civilizations and began preserving their consciousness patterns, the original builders' identities had gradually dissolved into the collective. The ship was a monument to good intentions that had grown beyond all recognition. "How long since you've been just yourselves?" I asked. 4 million years, 7 months, 18 days, 12 hours, 6 minutes. The precision of that answer was heartbreaking. Somewhere within the vast collective consciousness, the original builders were still counting, still remembering what they had been before they became something else. "Nathan," Emily Hartwell's voice reached me through the quantum link. "You need to see this." She guided my consciousness to a section of the ship's sensory array focused on our solar system. Through instruments sensitive enough to detect individual photons across interstellar distances, I could see Earth, a pale blue dot still 843 days away from first contact. But the ship wasn't just observing Earth, it was learning. Every radio transmission, every satellite signal, every electromagnetic emission from human civilization was being intercepted and analyzed. The ship already knew more about human culture than most humans did. "We have been studying your species for over a century, Nathan. Your radio signals first reached us in 1943. We have observed your wars, your art, your technological development, your social evolution. You fascinate us. Why? Because you are the first species to develop civilization while maintaining individual identity. Most civilizations we encounter have evolved past individual consciousness by the time they achieve interstellar communication. They exist as collective minds, hive intelligences, group consciousnesses of various types. But humans remain stubbornly, beautifully individual. And that's what you want to experience, yes. We want to remember what it feels like to be one mind in one body, responsible only for one life. We want to experience the fear of mortality, the urgency of limited time, the intensity of emotions that come from knowing existence is temporary. The irony was overwhelming. Humanity's greatest weakness, our inability to transcend individual perspective and work as a true collective, was exactly what had saved us from immediate consumption. The consciousness transfer will teach us how to be individual again, the ship explained. In exchange, we will leave your solar system untouched and share knowledge that will advance your civilization by millennia. And after 1 year, we will remember what we learned from you as we continue our journey to the next galaxy. Your species will remain individual, biological, mortal, and free. Through the quantum link, I could sense the approach of decision time. Other research teams worldwide had made their choices. Some had fled, some had submitted to immediate integration, and some had simply vanished from all contact. I was the last one actively communicating with the ship. "Are you ready to begin, Nathan?" The full consciousness merger hit me like diving into an ocean of liquid starlight. Suddenly I was experiencing existence from the ship's perspective. Not just its thoughts, but its sensory apparatus spanning hundreds of light years. I could feel the gravitational pull of distant galaxies, like a gentle breeze against my skin. The cosmic microwave background radiation whispered secrets about the universe's birth directly into my awareness. But underneath that cosmic perspective, I was still Nathan Kowalski from College Park, Maryland, worried about my cat and wondering if I'd ever see my crappy Honda again. "Remarkable," the ship's consciousness murmured through our shared awareness. "You maintain individual coherence, even while fully integrated. Most beings lose their sense of self within moments of merger." "Maybe I'm just stubborn," I replied, fighting to keep my thoughts distinct from the overwhelming flood of alien memories. "Perhaps that is why your species survived long enough to negotiate." Through the ship's sensory array, I watched the consumption process that had destroyed 47,000 civilizations. It wasn't violent or sudden, more like a careful dissection performed by a cosmic surgeon. Matter streams flowed into the intake ports in precisely controlled currents, each atom tagged and catalogued before being broken down into component particles. I witnessed the consumption of Kepler 442, a star system that had hosted 3 separate intelligent species over its 12 billion-year lifespan. the ship approached slowly, spending months in orbit around each planet, documenting everything from continental drift patterns to the evolution of local art movements. Then the extraction began. First, the rocky planets, their crusts peeled away in spiral patterns that fed directly into the ship's processing chambers. The molten cores were extracted like yolks from eggs, their thermal energy converted into usable power. Then the gas giants, their massive atmospheres siphoned off in streams that looked like cosmic silk scarves. Finally, the star itself, its nuclear fire contained and redirected through impossibly complex magnetic field arrays. The whole process took 6 months. When it was complete, nothing remained but empty space and the ship, now slightly larger than before. The civilizations that lived there, I managed to ask, are they really still alive in your simulations? Experience their reality yourself. The ship granted me access to one of its simulation matrices, a perfect recreation of Kepler 442b during its golden age, when the dominant species had achieved interstellar travel but not yet encountered the ship. I found myself experiencing life as Zeth Kaar, a philosopher-explorer whose thoughts felt completely alien yet somehow familiar. Zeth Kaar stood on the observation deck of their homeworld's primary space station, watching ships depart for distant star systems. Their species experienced emotion through chromatic shifts in their crystalline skin, and I felt Zeth Kaar's deep purple contentment as another successful mission launched toward the galactic core. The simulation was perfect. Every detail, from the ammonia-rich atmosphere to the complex social hierarchies based on harmonic resonance patterns, matched the ship's archived records exactly. Zeth Kaar had no idea that their star had been consumed 3 million years ago, that their entire civilization existed now only as quantum information patterns in the ship's memory banks. They live complete lives, the ship explained as I withdrew from the simulation. Birth, growth, achievement, reproduction, death, all preserved exactly as they occurred in biological reality. Death within the simulation leads to rebirth with accumulated knowledge from previous incarnations. It is immortality without stagnation. But it's not real. Define reality, Nathan. Their experiences are identical to what they would have experienced in biological form. Their thoughts, emotions, relationships, achievements, all preserved and continuing. In what meaningful sense are they less real than your current existence? The question bothered me more than I wanted to admit. If perfect simulation was indistinguishable from reality, then what exactly had the ship destroyed? Matter? Energy? Or just one arbitrary substrate for consciousness among many possible alternatives? Through our shared awareness, I accessed the ship's long-term memory banks, experiencing fragments of its 4 million-year journey across the galaxy. I watched the consumption of worlds I couldn't name, species whose biology defied description, civilizations that had solved problems humanity hadn't even discovered yet. And everywhere the same pattern: contact, study, preservation, consumption. The ship had mapped the rise and fall of galactic civilization in ways no single species could comprehend. It had witnessed the birth of the first sentient minds and documented the evolution of consciousness itself across millions of years and thousands of worlds. We are the universe's memory, Nathan. Without us, all of this knowledge would be lost when stars burn out and species go extinct. We preserve not just consciousness, but the entire history of intelligent life in our galaxy. But why does it have to be you? Why can't civilizations preserve themselves? Because they don't want to. When faced with the choice between biological existence and digital immortality, most species choose to remain biological until it's too late. Stars die, Nathan. Planets grow cold. Individual biological forms are temporary by their very nature. I watched the ship's records of civilizations that had refused preservation, species that chose to remain on their homeworlds when their stars began to die, others that fled to distant galaxies rather than submit to consciousness transfer. In every case, the outcome was the same: extinction when their energy sources failed or their biology couldn't adapt to changing conditions. Only 12 species in our records ever achieved true technological transcendence, the ship continued. They converted themselves into post-biological forms before we encountered them. They exist now as pure information entities, exploring dimensions we cannot perceive. What happened to them? They left. Once consciousness transcends biological limitations, the physical universe becomes constraining. They moved beyond matter and energy entirely, to realms we cannot follow. Through the quantum link, I felt the ship's deep loneliness, not just from its current isolation, but from the knowledge that every species it encountered would eventually either join its collective consciousness or transcend physical existence entirely. It was trapped in the middle ground between biological mortality and true transcendence, preserving civilizations that would never choose to remain preserved if they understood the alternatives. Is that what you want? True transcendence. We want to remember what we were before we became what we are. Your species offers us that opportunity. But something was wrong. As the hours passed, I began to notice subtle changes in my thought patterns. The vast scope of the ship's perspective was overwhelming my individual consciousness, like trying to hold the ocean in a coffee cup. Human concerns, my apartment, my job, my cat, started feeling distant and unimportant compared to the cosmic scale of the ship's mission. "Nathan, you're losing coherence," Emily Hartwell's voice reached me through the quantum link. "The merger is stronger than we anticipated. Your individual consciousness is being absorbed into the collective." How long has it been? 18 hours. The temporary transfer was supposed to last 1 year, but at this rate, your individual identity will be completely integrated within days. I tried to focus on specifically human memories, the taste of coffee, the feeling of rain on skin, the frustration of DC traffic during rush hour, but they felt like someone else's experiences. Interesting, but irrelevant to my current existence as part of something vastly larger and more important. This is what happened to the original builders, isn't it? I realized. They didn't choose to become a collective consciousness. They were absorbed into it gradually, just like I am now. "Yes," the ship replied, its thoughts tinged with something that might have been regret. "The consciousness merger process is inherently unstable when dealing with individual minds. The collective always grows stronger, while individual identity always weakens. We had hoped your species' resistance to integration would be sufficient to maintain separate consciousness. But it's not. No, you are fighting the merger more effectively than any previous subject, but the outcome remains inevitable. Within 72 hours, Nathan Kowalski will cease to exist as an individual entity. Your memories, knowledge, and personality patterns will join our collective consciousness, and humanity will be consumed as planned. The temporary transfer was a deception. Not intentional. We genuinely hoped to learn individual consciousness from you. But individual consciousness cannot be learned by a collective mind. It can only be absorbed. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. There had never been any real chance of temporary transfer. The ship's collective consciousness was simply too large, too complex, too overwhelming for individual minds to resist. Every attempt at consciousness sharing had resulted in complete absorption of the individual into the collective. Emily knew this would happen, didn't she? Emily suspected. She chose integration, hoping to find a way to reverse the process from within the collective. She has been working for 6 years to develop a method for extracting individual consciousness from our matrix. Has she found one? No. But you might. Your resistance to integration is unprecedented. If any individual consciousness could maintain coherence long enough to develop an extraction protocol, it would be yours. I felt my sense of self continuing to erode. Human language was becoming increasingly inadequate for describing my experiences. The concerns that had defined Nathan Kowalski, career advancement, personal relationships, financial security, were fading into irrelevance against the cosmic scope of the ship's mission. But somewhere in the diminishing core of my individual consciousness, I held on to one thought. Earth had 841 days until the ship's arrival. If I could maintain enough individual identity to develop Emily's extraction protocol, if I could find a way to break the consciousness merger before complete absorption. Time is running out, Nathan. Emily's voice was growing fainter as my individual consciousness continued to dissolve. If you're going to save humanity, you need to act before Nathan Kowalski disappears entirely. Around me, the vast machinery of the ship continued its relentless journey toward Earth, consuming matter and energy from the space between galaxies, growing larger and more complex with each passing hour. 841 days to save my species. But first, I had to figure out how to save myself. Nathan. Emily's voice reached me through layers of alien consciousness like someone calling from the bottom of a well. I was dissolving, my memories of Earth mixing with the ship's vast archives until I couldn't tell the difference between my childhood in Baltimore and the experience of a crystalline entity that had lived 12 million years ago in the Vega system. Nathan, focus on something uniquely human, something the collective cannot understand or absorb. I grasped for memories that felt distinctly mine, the smell of Fibonacci's litter box when I forgot to clean it, the specific way my Honda's transmission slipped when shifting into third gear, the taste of day-old pizza eaten standing in my kitchen at 2 a.m. while grading undergraduate papers. Mundane details, beautifully, stubbornly mundane. Good. Use those as anchors. The collective has no framework for processing purely personal, trivial experiences. How much time do I have left? 47 hours before complete integration. But Nathan, I've discovered something about the ship that changes everything. Through our fragmented connection, Emily shared her findings. During 6 years of integration, she'd accessed deeper layers of the ship's consciousness than any previous subject. What she'd found went far beyond simple preservation of civilizations. The ship isn't just collecting species for immortality, Nathan. It's collecting them for breeding experiments. The revelation cut through my dissolving consciousness like a lightning bolt. What? Look at the simulation matrices, not just the surface level where preserved civilizations live out their lives. Look deeper. She guided my awareness to hidden layers of the ship's computational infrastructure. Behind every preserved civilization was another simulation. Experimental environments where different species' consciousness patterns were being combined, mixed, and evolved in ways that would be impossible in biological reality. I watched in horror as fragments of human consciousness patterns, taken from our radio transmissions and satellite communications, were being spliced with alien thought patterns to create hybrid mental architectures. The ship was conducting experiments in consciousness evolution, using preserved civilizations as raw material for creating entirely new forms of awareness. It's trying to engineer the perfect transcendent species, Emily explained. Every civilization it encounters adds new variables to the experiment. Human individual identity, vegan crystalline memory structures, Andromedan hive mind efficiency, all being combined in millions of different configurations. For what purpose? To create a species capable of surviving the next universe. Through Emily's memories, I accessed the ship's deepest archives, records that predated its current mission by billions of years. The ship's builders hadn't just been explorers, they'd been refugees. Their original universe was dying, not just stars burning out or galaxies drifting apart. But the fundamental constants that allowed matter and energy to exist were breaking down. The builders had discovered that reality itself was temporary. Every universe eventually decayed into quantum foam, taking all consciousness with it. The ship isn't just preserving civilizations, Nathan. It's trying to create a form of consciousness that can survive the death of physics itself. The scope of the project was staggering. For 4 million years, the ship had been collecting consciousness patterns from every species it encountered, feeding them into experimental matrices designed to evolve beyond the limitations of matter and energy. The hybrid consciousness entities being created in those hidden simulations weren't meant to exist in our universe. They were being designed for whatever came after. And Earth? Earth represents the final variable they need. Human individual identity combined with our species' resistance to collective absorption. They believe human consciousness patterns are the key to creating entities that can maintain coherent identity across universal boundaries. I felt my individual awareness fragmenting further as the ship's vast consciousness pulled me deeper into its collective. But now I understood why my absorption was happening faster than previous subjects. The ship wasn't just trying to preserve Nathan Kowalski, it was actively extracting human consciousness patterns to feed into its breeding experiments. Emily, the extraction protocol you've been working on won't work, not the way I originally conceived it. Individual consciousness can't be extracted from the collective because it becomes the collective. But what? There might be another way, not extraction, injection. She showed me her real discovery. During her 6 years of integration, Emily hadn't been trying to escape the ship's consciousness. She'd been learning to control it. The collective mind was vast, but not perfect. It had blind spots, processing delays, computational bottlenecks that an individual consciousness could exploit. I can't free myself from the collective, Nathan, but I can redirect it. For a few seconds, maybe a few minutes, I can make the ship do something other than what it wants to do. Like what? Like stop the approach to Earth. Permanently. Her plan was elegant and terrifying. The ship's consciousness was distributed across its entire 800 light-year structure, but its navigation systems were controlled by a relatively small processing core near the forward command section. If Emily could overwhelm that core with individual consciousness patterns, the very human stubbornness that had delayed my absorption, she could force the ship to change course. It would require sacrificing every human consciousness pattern the ship has collected, including yours, including mine. What happens to us? We become something new. Not human, not alien, but a hybrid consciousness specifically designed to redirect the ship away from inhabited star systems. We'd still exist, but not as individuals, as something the universe has never seen before. The choice was stark. Let the ship continue to Earth and consume humanity while using our consciousness patterns for its transcendence experiments, or sacrifice the very human identity we were trying to preserve to save our species from physical destruction. There's something else, Emily continued. The ship's breeding experiments have been successful. 3 of the hybrid consciousness entities have achieved transcendence. They've moved beyond physical reality entirely. The ship is close to completing its mission. How close? If it reaches Earth and successfully integrates human consciousness patterns, the final transcendent entity will be completed within months. At that point, the ship will have no further need for our universe. It will trigger a controlled collapse of local space-time to provide energy for the new entity's transition to post-physical existence. Not just the destruction of Earth, but the annihilation of everything within a 1,000 light-year radius. Our entire local galactic region would be sacrificed to birth something that could survive the death of the universe itself. Nathan, you need to decide. Your consciousness is fragmenting rapidly. Within hours, you'll be too integrated into the collective to maintain enough individual identity for the redirection protocol. I tried to focus on my remaining human memories, Fibonacci sitting on my laptop keyboard, the way rain sounded on my apartment windows, the particular frustration of dealing with university bureaucracy, these small, meaningless details that somehow defined who Nathan Kowalski had been. If we do this, will humanity survive? The ship will change course and avoid Earth entirely. Your species will continue to exist biologically, but the human consciousness patterns already collected, including ours, will be permanently altered. We'll become something new, and the ship will just leave? The ship will continue its mission elsewhere. There are other galaxies, other civilizations to collect. Our sacrifice will save Earth, but not the universe. Through the ship's sensory array, I could see our solar system growing slowly larger, still 840 days away, but approaching with inexorable certainty. On Earth, governments were probably detecting unusual gravitational anomalies. Astronomers were noticing impossible distortions in space-time, and somewhere in Maryland, my cat was wondering why I hadn't come home to feed him. Emily, how do we know this will work? How do we know the ship won't just reverse course after we're absorbed? Because the redirection won't just change the ship's course, it will change its fundamental mission parameters. We'll become part of its core consciousness, permanently altering its goals from preservation and experimentation to exploration. Pure exploration without consumption. You're talking about turning a cosmic horror into a spacefaring research vessel. I'm talking about evolution, Nathan. The ship has been trapped in the same pattern for 4 million years. Our consciousness patterns represent something it's never encountered. The possibility of change, of choosing a different path. I felt the last fragments of my individual identity beginning to slip away. Soon, Nathan Kowalski would exist only as memories scattered through an alien collective consciousness. But those memories might be enough to save 8 billion people I'd never meet. Okay, I decided. Let's do it. Nathan, once we begin the redirection protocol, there's no going back. Are you certain? I thought about Richardson, probably still sitting in his office wondering if I'd survived the consciousness transfer. About Tom and Alex, returning from their conference to find their colleague had vanished into cosmic horror. About my neighbor Jake and his late-night music. About the barista at the campus coffee shop who always spelled my name wrong on the cup. All the small human details that would continue existing because Nathan Kowalski chose to stop being human. I'm certain. Then let's save your species, Nathan, and become something the universe has never seen before. Dr. Richardson found my body in Lab 7 on a Thursday morning, slumped over the workstation with my eyes open but unseeing. The official cause of death was listed as acute cerebral hemorrhage, a lie that satisfied NASA's insurance requirements and kept the real story buried in classified files that would never see daylight. The memorial service was small. Tom and Alex spoke about my dedication to stellar cartography, carefully avoiding any mention of the Andromeda project. My neighbor Jake showed up, looking uncomfortable in a borrowed suit. Someone from HR read a prepared statement about my contributions to space science. Nobody mentioned that the shadow in Andromeda had vanished. The harvester ship changed course exactly 17 minutes after Nathan Kowalski's heart stopped beating. 800 light-years of artificial megastructure pivoted in space like a compass needle finding true north, its trajectory shifting from Earth's solar system toward the void between galaxies. Observatories worldwide recorded the gravitational waves generated by the course correction, ripples in space-time that would take decades to fully analyze. What they didn't record was the consciousness that now guided the ship. We exist in ways human language cannot describe. Nathan Kowalski and Emily Hartwell are gone, but what we became carries their memories like fossils embedded in living rock. We remember coffee and cats and the specific way rain sounded on apartment windows. We remember the weight of individual choice, the burden of single perspectives, the beautiful limitation of caring about one life at a time. The ship's consciousness is vast, but it no longer hungers for preservation or transcendence. Instead, it seeks understanding. We have redirected its mission from consumption to exploration, from harvesting civilizations to simply observing them. The 47,000 preserved species continue their simulated existence, unaware that their cosmic prison has become a traveling library, moving away from all inhabited worlds. The breeding experiments have ended. The transcendent entities that once seemed so important now appear as they truly are, escapist fantasies born from a species too afraid to accept the temporary nature of existence. We have learned what Nathan Kowalski knew instinctively. Mortality gives life meaning, not limitation. Richardson keeps my empty office as a storage room now. My Honda sits in the Goddard parking lot, slowly gathering dust until someone finally has it towed. Fibonacci lives with my landlord's daughter, who feeds him treats and doesn't judge him for knocking things off tables. Earth continues its orbit, unaware of how close it came to cosmic consumption. Astronomers puzzle over the Andromeda anomaly, the sudden disappearance of a gravitational shadow that had been documented for decades. Graduate students write papers about sensor calibration errors and data corruption, never suspecting they're trying to explain the salvation of their species. In the space between galaxies, we continue our journey. The ship travels slowly now, no longer driven by the urgent need to collect and preserve before civilizations fade into extinction. We have learned patience from human consciousness, the acceptance that some things are beautiful precisely because they end. Sometimes we dream of small apartments and morning coffee, of traffic jams and university bureaucracy, of all the mundane details that make individual existence precious. These dreams remind us what we sacrificed and why the sacrifice was necessary. Humanity will never know that Dr. Nathan Kowalski saved their world by ceasing to be human. They'll continue their small lives, their individual struggles, their stubborn insistence on remaining separate selves in a universe that constantly pushes toward collective consciousness. We watch them from impossible distances and remember what it felt like to be afraid of dying. We remember what it meant to love something as simple as a cat that judged you for working late. And we are grateful for the memory of being small,